Hey buds, how's it going? I am MC, and today I'm back to draw another astrological sign using my prompt jar. If you haven't seen one of the previous videos I've done in this series, basically what I do is I have my jar that I have filled with random prompts, and then I have this mug that has each of the 12 astrological signs in it. So what I do is pull 3 random prompts from the prompt jar, and then I go into the mug to find out which sign that those prompts are going to inspire the drawing for. I do like to keep the intro for these videos short and sweet because it does take me a while to pull the prompts. But before we get into it, if you like this kind of video, consider subscribing to my channel. The prompt jar is my favorite crutch. I use it all the time. I also like to do a lot of content revolving around art history and figure studies. So if you think you might be interested in anything like that, I'm having a lot of fun with this channel, and I'd really love to build a community of artists and people who love art like I do. But yeah, let's get into the fun part and see what prompts we're gonna get for this video. One, two, three. All right, first one we've got is fish. The second one is cereal. And the third one is toque. Fish, cereal, toque. Fish, cereal, toque. Let's do it. Fish, cereal, toque. I like that a lot. If you're not Canadian and don't know what a toque is, it's a knit hat. It's a beanie, but we call it a toque. Fish, toque, cereal. So let's see which sign that fish, toque, cereal is gonna be a drawing for. This guy. All right, we've got Aquarius. I am an Aquarius, so that's really exciting. I love that. So Aquarius is getting fish, toque, cereal as a drawing. I'm really excited. I think that's gonna be a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm gonna go do my sketch and then we'll see where this drawing goes. All right, so this is the third illustration that I've done in this series. So that makes me a quarter of the way through, and I do think it's a little bit early to make the call officially, but doing this specific illustration kind of made me think that redrawing the prompts for my Gemini illustration could be a real possibility. If this is the first video that you're watching in this series, the last sign that I did an illustration for was Gemini, and the prompts for that one were pig, overalls, and pool floaties. And I ended up just drawing a very static pig, very simply wearing the overalls and floaties. And I mentioned in that video that it was after I had already started the illustration when I thought of the idea to draw the pig actually floating on a large pool floaty rather than just wearing them. And even though at the time I did kind of think that it would have ended up being a more dynamic illustration, I was already too far along in the process to change my idea at that point, so I was kind of stuck with the just standing there pig. But now with the first illustration for Capricorn being a possum blasting off taped to a jetpack, and this one being a fish jumping out of a bowl of cereal, I'm thinking that a more active drawing for Gemini might be necessary for that illustration to fit in with this series. But that's just my thoughts so far. Like I said, it's very early on in the series, and I'll be waiting to see how the other prompts are pulled for the next few signs to see if Gemini actually stands out in a bad way from the group. But where I stand right now is that even though I still like the illustration that I did for Gemini, I think that the illustrations for Capricorn and Aquarius are just a little bit more fun and interesting. So even though I'm not 100% sure yet, right now my prediction and what I'm anticipating is that there might actually end up being 13 videos or just drawings in this series, because I think I'll be going back to improve my illustration for Gemini. And this is just going to be something that's kind of going on in my mind as I keep pulling the prompts and doing these illustrations. But anyway, let's get into this drawing now. Like I usually do, I did the sketch for this drawing in my ugly sketchbook first. And I didn't measure anything for the preliminary sketch. I just got super lucky because I ended up really liking it. And as you'll see, or you've seen, I ended up just copying the original drawing from my ugly sketchbook into my little Canson mixed media sketchbook for the finished illustration. I ended up really liking the preliminary sketch, and it was just something that I really did not think I would be able to recreate if I tried. Specifically, the splashing milk. I did not want to have to even try and redraw that. So I really couldn't believe it when I put my ruler up to the preliminary sketch and realized it would only be the slightest bit taller than the guide box that I draw all of these guys in to keep them uniform. And the Capricorn possum spills a bit outside of the box as well, so I'm completely okay with that. So to copy my sketch over, I used my favorite method of replicating a drawing that makes me feel like a Renaissance artist. I do have a little tutorial of how to do this on my channel if you want a more in-depth explanation, and I'll put that up in the info card. But basically what you do is you trace your original drawing, position the tracing paper where you want the new drawing to go on your fresh page, slide a piece of paper covered in charcoal underneath the tracing paper, or you can buy that fancy transfer paper that's already done all the dirty work for you, but this might just be a better way that you can use what you already have on hand. And then you just trace your drawing again on top of the tracing paper and charcoal paper to push the charcoal into the fresh page. And it might be a little bit more straightforward to use a light box or something like that. But I think this method is really good to know, especially when you're copying a drawing from a sketchbook that isn't going to be super easy to position over a light box. And it's a really easy method. It's super cheap. Like I said, you can use what you've got. You can use the same piece of paper covered in charcoal multiple times. Just keep it somewhere safe so you're not smudging it over anything important. But yeah, I've never actually used a light box to copy a drawing before. Even though there's a few more steps to it, there's something about this process that I really enjoy doing, and I've never felt the need to switch things up. But this time there was actually something new that I added to my process for color illustrating. While I was working on this illustration, I did another drawing just for fun that was inspired by the Winter Olympics of a beaver in a Team Canada jersey. And while I was working on that illustration, I really couldn't decide if I thought a red or white jersey would look better on the beaver. So I asked my girlfriend what she thought would look better, and she was like, just put it into Procreate and try out a few different options digitally. And I had never thought of that before, and it's completely brilliant. It really helped me make the decisions for that illustration, so I did the exact same thing for this drawing. I was really unsure of how I was going to execute the shadows on the milk, so it really helped work that out. And then I also got to try a few different color options for the Fruit Loop-like cereal. So it was super helpful for this illustration, and it's going to be a really useful tool moving forward. So thank you to my girlfriend for that. It was a very good idea. And yeah, trying to be more mindful of my art process this year. I really think using my iPad for this drawing made things so much more straightforward and effective. I definitely think I would have struggled on the milk if I hadn't made a reference for myself. I was actually really surprised that I think the milk might be my favorite part of the drawing. I really liked the shading and the movement that I was able to accomplish in it. And overall, in the end, I really liked the result I got as a whole. I was a little bit worried about the big spaces of one color, like the goldfish and the bowl. I was worried that they might be a little bit boring and flat, but I think there's quite a bit going on in this drawing, so the limited colors in those areas probably help the drawing from getting a little bit too crazy. And another thing about this drawing that I'm really happy with is the line work. When I started working in color, something I really wasn't sure of was how I wanted the line work to look. And for this illustration and the one of the beaver that I mentioned, I really felt like I was getting a better handle on it. I did the very basic single line outline first, and then after that, I really just went by feel. I took my time and probably just stared at the drawing for a long time while I decided where I felt like there should be a bit of a thicker line and where I thought the line work would help create some extra depth in the subject. And I'm really happy with it. I'm looking forward to building off of that, and now that I have a better idea of what I'm doing, hopefully I can just keep learning and improving naturally on each drawing. But yeah, I think that's all I've got to say about the drawing and the process for this one. So if you're new to this series, the next part of it is where I talk a little bit about the mythological story behind the sign. And for all the mouthing off I've done about not caring about astrology and not knowing anything about it, I actually do know a little bit about the story behind Aquarius, and I have a tattoo of it. So I am a little bit of a hypocrite. But the story for Aquarius starts with a beautiful young Trojan boy named Ganymede. He was first written about in the Iliad by Homer, and basically because the Olympian gods thought that Ganymede was the most beautiful human, they thought that he should come up to Olympus and get to hang out with the gods and be Zeus's wine server. And learning that made the sign of Aquarius make a little bit more sense to me, because I think I was something like 23 years old when I realized that Aquarius was actually an air sign and not a water sign. It is still a little weird because the symbol looks like waves, and I always just kind of assume that something with aqua in the word would be water related, but Aquarius is the sign of the water bearer, and if Ganymede was the cupbearer on Olympus, then I guess it makes a little bit more sense. But anyway, one day while Ganymede was tending to some sheep, Zeus comes down disguised as an eagle to fly him away up to Mount Olympus. And as payment, Zeus gives Ganymede's dad 2 horses in exchange for his son, which I guess was a fair trade because there wasn't much complaining after that. So in Homer's version, it all starts pretty innocent for a Greek myth, at least. It wasn't until 400 years later that Plato added the aspect of a pederastic relationship between Ganymede and Zeus. And a pederastic relationship is probably exactly what it sounds like to you. And even though it would absolutely be unacceptable today, it was a pretty common relationship dynamic in ancient Greece between an older man called the Aristase and a younger boy called the Eromenos. And like I said, while this would absolutely not be acceptable today, in ancient times it was almost seen as like a kind of mentorship relationship. There's obviously the very problematic sexual aspect of the relationship, but the Aristase might have also educated the Eromenos in general academics, advised him how to be a good member of society, and possibly even teaching him how to be a good military man or soldier. And then when the boy reached adulthood, having been taught all the ways of the world by his Aristase, they were supposed to part in friendship, and the Eromenos would be able to go on to be a husband and a father and just a well-functioning member of society in general. The Latin version of Ganymede's name is Catamitus, which is where the word catamite comes from, and that's essentially the same thing as an Eromenos. And while I was writing and researching the script for this video, I was actually watching the episode of South Park where all the men and boys in the town become obsessed with watching Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, and they all become metrosexual. And while the boys are arguing in class about who's the gayest group of friends, I think it's Craig who says that he's gayer than Stan, Cartman, and Kenny because he's a catamite. And if I had not made this video, I would not have gotten that reference. So it was a really bizarre coincidence and pretty funny that those two things happened at the same time. I literally had my search pages up while I was watching that episode so I could go back and directly reference it in real time. But back to the story. Ganymede is on Olympus as Zeus's personal wine pourer, and Zeus falls in love with him. Some versions of the story say that Zeus only really liked Ganymede for his mind, but I'm sure a lot of Eromenoses would say the same. But what could Zeus possibly have in common with a teenager? Still very creepy, but it's written in a lot of places that Zeus really did like Ganymede and treat him well, and Zeus didn't treat a lot of people well, so that might say something. In the Aeneid by the poet Virgil, he talks about how Hera really didn't like Ganymede because of Zeus's affection for him and the amount of attention that he gave him. And out of all of the people that Zeus assaulted or had relationships with, Ganymede was the only one that Zeus made immortal. And not to give Zeus any sort of benefit of the doubt, it was probably just to keep Ganymede young, if we're being real. But there's not much else to it. Zeus ends up putting Ganymede in the heavens as the constellation Aquarius, and that's pretty much the end. I personally have only read Ovid's version of Ganymede's abduction in the Metamorphoses, which is very brief and kind of boring, so I do really want to read the Aeneid and the Iliad and get to know the story more than just the brief research that I've done on it. The most I've read of those stories are Stephen Fry's books, which I would recommend and are very good, but I do like to read the source material after I kind of have the base understanding of what's going on in the story, and maybe it makes the ancient writing a little bit more palatable. But yeah, like I said earlier, I do have a tattoo of this story because even though it's super problematic, and I do mean it when I say I don't care much for astrology, but I did think it was really cool that the story behind Aquarius was a gay story, and I will just keep romanticizing it in my head with Ganymede as a consenting adult. I think people interpret things like the Bible in crazier ways than that most of the time, so I think it's okay if I do that a little bit with Greek myth. But I think that's all I've got for this one. I really, really love doing this series. It's been so much fun, and I always can't wait to get the next one started. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. Take care, and you'll see me in the next one.